Hi everyone, my name's Heather from the World Bank, and we're going to be continuing on with our knitting lessons today. Just to recap, last time we went over garter stitch, and we have our sample here, which has been washed and blocked and is now nice and flat and fluffy, got a little bit more evened out there. And then today we're going to be covering a new stitch pattern, which is called Stockinette Stitch. And to do that, we'll have to learn how to purl a stitch. We've just been knitting so far with garter stitch, knit flat. We've just been straight knitting. But with Stockinette Stitch, we'll learn how to purl and teach you the right side and the wrong side, and also how to use a stitch marker to keep those straight. Alright, so to start, we have a sample here that's already kind of gotten going, and it is garter stitch, which is what we learned last time. So you can see it looks the same, but it is a different color. So in this case, you can tell how they are both the same on each side of the work. And when we were doing this pattern, we were just knitting all the way across, turning the work, and then knitting back across on the other side. But in other stitch patterns, you do have to keep track of the right side versus the wrong side of the work, or the terms that are used. So in this case, this is the right side. So I'm going to mark that with a stitch marker. There's multiple types, but you're gonna, in this case, want to use one that has a little clasp on it, so you can clip it onto the front of your work. So I'll use this one just because it's nice and bright. And you can, this is the right side. We've hopefully kept track of that from the beginning, and you'll get more used to it, when you're reading patterns and looking at them more often. And then with some stitch patterns, you can very easily tell what the right side versus the wrong side is. But in this case, we're just saying this is the right side, and that's how we'll start our stockinette stitch. So on the right side, to do stockinette stitch, you are just knitting straight across. So kind of what we learned in our last sessions, we'll just knit into our first stitch and knit all the way to the end. Last stitch, and we knit all the way across, and we turn the work, and now we're on the wrong side. You can tell because there's no stitch marker. So here is where we're going to learn our new skill, which is the purl stitch. So with stockinette stitch, on the wrong side of the work, you will be purling. So to purl, you, instead of going in from the front, you're kind of going in from the back downwards with your right needle. And you wrap around your right needle this way from back to front. You pull through the gap, also kind of going from front to back here. And then you drop the needle, drop the stitch from your left needle. And when you're purling, you keep the yarn in front of the work, whereas when you're knitting, you keep it in the back. But to continue on, you pull your yarn to the front. You go this way from back to front through this, front leg here. Wrap your yarn around. Pull through the gap you've made, just like with knitting, and you drop the old stitch. Again in slow motion, go into the front leg of your stitch, wrap around from back to front, pull through the gap, and drop the stitch. So it's a little hard to see at this point, but this is what a purl stitch looks like. It's the little bump, and you have been making them with garter stitch by utilizing the wrong side of the work. When you knit on the wrong side, it shows as a purl on the right side. So keep going and just purl all the way through this row. the last stitch now, and again we just treat that the same, and we just purl into that last stitch, and you drop the final one so you have a free needle again. There you go. So this is our purl row. It has the little bumps, and then we flip again and we'll be back on the right side of the work. So we do another, so you can see already this is stockinette stitch where it's just, they look like all knit stitches. And even though you purled on this wrong side, it makes a knit stitch on the right side. So that's why you get just, you know, straight knitting on the right side, which is what you're looking for. So I'll do a couple more rows to show you how it looks like when we get a little further in, and then we'll check in. So again, we're on the right side, so we knit all the way across. So we've gotten to the end of this row on the right side, so we knit our last stitch. We flip again, and this is just a repetitive process where now we're back on the wrong side, so we purl all the way across. So we stuck our needle in from back to front, wrap around back to front, pull through the gap, and then that's your first purl stitch. And then we purl all the way to the end. Just like normal. So purl on the wrong side, knit on the right side, and I can check in with you once we've gotten a little bit further to see what our stitch pattern is looking like. So I've done a couple more rows here on our sample. So this is stockinette stitch when you've gotten a little bit farther, and it just looks like all knit stitches basically. So you can compare it to the garter stitch, which is right next to it, which you can see the purl stitches on the right side basically. So it alternates from the knit stitch to a purl stitch, knit stitch, purl stitch. Whereas this is just all straight knit stitches. And then when you look at the wrong side, you'll see that the stockinette stitch is drastically different. So this is the wrong side of stockinette stitch, which is just all purls. Whereas garter stitch looks pretty much the same as it did on the front. So that's where the right side and the wrong side becomes important, because you want this side to be facing out on a sweater or whatever your finished object is. For stockinette stitch, but it could be used alternatively where if you want to highlight the purl stitches, that's an option as well. So there's our finished sample. Going back to the skills that we've learned, we have another sample here where you can clearly see this is garter stitch on the edge, and then this is stockinette stitch in, you know, different little cubes here, and then this is stockinette stitch as well, but it's the wrong side, so this is all purls. You can see on the other side, it's knits. You can see how in our sample that we just made, it's a little, you know, it's curling up at the edges. It's not as even, but with the sample that we made last time, it's a little more evened out. It's been blocked, so it's been washed and then laid out to dry flat. So everything is evened out a little bit more. Yeah. So these are a couple samples. You could use this for a little, you know, baby doll blanket, and, you know, very popular. This garter stitch is very common with baby items in general. One of the other kind of differences with garter and stockinette is that you can see how flat this is laying, and even this with its garter stitch edge, whereas stockinette stitch tends to curl up based off of the tension, so you can see it just wants to roll in on itself. Whereas garter stitch stays nice and flat, so that's kind of a perk with garter stitch, honestly. And then you may not even have to block if you don't want to. Whereas this you definitely have to block so it doesn't curl. Okay, so we finished our lesson today. I'll teach you how to do stockinette when knit flat. Next time we'll kind of go one step further and see how we can use both these stitch patterns, stockinette or garter stitch, to knit in a circle. So there's different options. We'll go over that next time on how you can knit in the round, they call it, or you can knit flat and seam together, and we'll go into that more in our next session. Thanks so much.